Okay, so a while back, I bought the Plini X plugin when it was on sale with the intentions of having it around for when they had plugin compatibility with the Quad Cortex. This is the first plugin they announced would have that compatibility once they get that done. And lately, I've got tired of waiting, and since I just picked myself up a new laptop replacing my 10-year-old MacBook Pro, I figured I'd bust it out and try it out. And so I don't have any other interface right now other than the Quad Cortex. And so what I ended up doing was integrating the standalone plugin with the Quad Cortex to use as kind of an extension. And I had to go through a few hoops to make that work. And I figured it'd be worthwhile to kind of walk through that. And at the same time, maybe do a brief demo of the Plini X plugin. Let's talk about the integration of it with the Quad Cortex in a few ways. I'm actually integrating in a few ways. And so I created this preset, and you can see it's called QC as interface. So this is just a preset I created to do this. And for now, we'll ignore lines 3 and 4. We'll get to those in a second. But line 1 is really the instrument to plugin that's acting as an interface. And really, this is pretty straightforward. I've just got my in, and then I'm sending out just to the USB. And the only thing I would say here is I've cranked the level to 12 dBs. Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the output level to be around negative 12 dBs when I play. So this is about that. If I hit it really hard, it gets up to about that level. So this is, I think, in like an optimal level for the input to the plugin. And then if we go over to the plugin, we go to the settings, and you can see I've got the Quad Cortex as the input device, and I'm picking USB output 3. So that's my input for the plugin. For the output, I'm actually sending it back to the Quad Cortex via USB input 5 and 6, so a stereo signal going back because there's stereo effects in the plugin. And I've also got the Quad Cortex set up as a MIDI input device so that we can switch presets in the plugin from the Quad Cortex. And we'll get into that as well. But for now, let's talk about the audio paths. So we go back to my preset, you can see I have 2 lines here that are taking in that USB 5 and 6 inputs. And we click here, you can see it's input 5 and 6 is the start of each path. And the reason there's 2 paths here is there's 2 things. One, I need to send the preset signal back to my computer to record in Logic so I can make this video. And that's what this is. Line 3 is running the input back from the plugin, and it's sending it back to the USB out 5 and 6, which is what I'm consuming through Logic so you can hear what I'm playing. And I'm also taking USB 5 and 6 here, and I'm sending it to out. So this is so I can monitor the sound of it through my monitors that I use for the Quad Cortex. So there's many ins and outs to getting the signal moving in the right direction so I can record it into Logic and hear it through my monitors hooked to the Quad Cortex. And in terms of Logic, you might be asking, well, why aren't you using the plugin in Logic? I'm having some issues getting this plugin to work in Logic. I actually have a question out on the forum right now. I'll probably be putting in a support case on this. So let's put that aside for now. I'm just using the standalone version of the plugin. So right now we've got everything routed with the QC, and we can hear, you can see I'm on a preset called Chorus Clean, and here's what it sounds like. Nice clean tone there. So let's talk about MIDI control before we get into the plugin. So the settings here, you can see I've got the Quad Cortex set up as a MIDI input device. And so if I go back to my preset and I go to my MIDI out, you can see here I've got the different toggles set up to send MIDI signals. And you can just see if you look at what I'm sending the CC toggle type where all of them are on channel 1, and then I'm just incrementing the CC number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this way I can send these signals to the plugin software on my computer and have it change the presets. So if I go back here, if we go to the MIDI map for the plugin, you can see I've hooked in the MIDI mapping that is setting the preset I want based on the CC number that I'm sending. So 1, 2, 3, 4, everything but 5, I think. I don't have anything mapped to 5. And what that allows me to do, I go back here and I go to gig view. As I swap scenes, it'll switch the preset on the plugin. Now, one thing I'll say that I haven't figured out yet is I actually have to trigger the foot switch twice to get it to switch. If I do once, it won't switch. The second time, it'll switch. I don't know why that is. I'm still trying to figure that out. And I'll admit, I'm not a huge MIDI expert. I'm still trying to learn this stuff. But stepping on the switch twice is not a big deal. It still allows me to switch those presets. So I can be on scene A and have my nice chorus clean, and then I can just hit scene B and switch to a low gain tone. And then switch over here to get a much higher gain tone. So that's nice because I can control the plugin on my computer from the foot switches on the Quad Cortex, which is nice. So I can really kind of have a preset. As long as I pair my Quad Cortex with the computer, I have a set of presets here that's driven from the plugin. So that's how I'm using the Quad Cortex, and it seems to be working pretty well. So let's just do a quick run through of the plugin. I'm new to plugins. This is the first one I've really spent any amount of time with. If you're an expert on the plugins, you probably won't care to watch this. I'm just going to go through it real quick and play around with some of the tones and talk about kind of what's here in the plugin. But if you're like me, who's only played with the Quad Cortex, hasn't used the plugins, this might be of interest to you. When we look at the plugin, if you can see up here, this is your kind of signal path. So you have pre-effects, you have your amp, you have your cabinet, you place your mics, you have a EQ, and then you have your post effects. So pre-effects, you've got a compressor, which I have on now, you've got an octaver. You've got a drive. And the drive has a good amount of gain on it. I'm using a Stress style guitar, so it's not super high output. You can also switch to a fuzz. So real versatile drive pedal there. And then you've got a delay here. I'm using the delay in the back end, and we'll look at that in a second. On the amps, you get 3 different amps. You get this kind of cleanish amp here. You get a kind of a mid-gain kind of thing here. And then you've got a high-gain amp here. So the clean tone is, when I go to low gain, I'm using the mid-gain one. You can even use that one for a lead. And then this is with the high gain. On the back end, you've got a chorus. Again, my clean tone's got it on. I got the mix pretty low on this. I can turn it up so we can hear it. And then you've got your delay here with a bunch of controls. You can ping pong or not. You can do a tap tempo, so you can set it here. And then you've got a reverb on the back end. So I've got that on just for a little bit. The mix isn't very high and the decay is pretty low. I didn't want too much there. And then for the lower gain tone, again there, I'm just using this mid-gain amp. I don't have anything on in the front. For this lead tone, I did kick in the drive in front of the mid-gain amp for kind of an Eric Johnson-y kind of thing. At least that's what I was going for. Probably too much treble for a true Eric Johnson kind of sound, but it kind of worked. And then for this kind of high gain lead, I've got the lead channel. Not much gain on that. I'm actually using the overdrive in front of it. So it sounds like this. So a real nice, super thick lead there. I haven't really played around much with the cabinet and placing the mics. You know, it's a lot like the Quad Cortex. You just kind of move the position. You can even double click to put it back in the default. You can put in custom IRs. I haven't played around with that yet, but you can see the mics are similar to the ones you get on the Quad Cortex, which is not surprising. It's neural DSP. Global settings. You can see here, you can run input in stereo or mono. The reason I don't get a stereo option is because I only set the input to have one input and not, so I'm using 3 from the USB, not 3 and 4. You can transpose. So I want to bring everything down an octave. So you can bring that down an octave, or you can bring it up an octave. So that's nice. It's got an input gate on by default, which is nice. So you don't need to use the one on the Quad Cortex. You can double. That's kind of what I've been up to, trying to integrate this plugin with the Quad Cortex. It's working pretty well. It took me a while to figure out this flow aspect of how to get the sound into my monitor so I could hear it while I'm playing, but also be able to record into Logic. And so this kind of back and forth with the different USB inputs and outputs ended up working. And I'm not noticing any significant lag or anything like that. Now, maybe if I was recording against a track in Logic, maybe there might be some latency there. I don't think so. Everything's moving pretty fast. So I'll put this preset up on my Cortex Cloud account if you want to grab it and do a similar kind of experiment. Again, the way it's working, we have input 1. We're setting it out to USB 3. And then on the plugin, my input device is Quad Cortex, USB 3. Output device is Quad Cortex. I'm sending it to USB 5 and 6. You go over here, lines 3 and 4, the input is USB 5 and 6. And then line 3 is going to USB 5 and 6 output, so they can go back into Logic. So in Logic, I'm setting it to look at the Quad Cortex for 5 and 6. And then I've got the other line going to the out 1 and 2. This is my monitors that I have hooked up into my Quad Cortex that's on the XLR outputs. So that's 1 and 2. If you're running to the TLR, that'd be 3 and 4, but I'm using 1 and 2. Also remember, you've got the MIDI set up here in the Quad Cortex. I think this is kind of global. And so as long as I make sure that the switches are sending different signals, then I can go into the plugin, configure what those signals do. Anyway, I hope you found this interesting, and thanks for watching.